The purpose of this Blender plugin is to simplify the process of working with volumetric fog or smoke inside of Blender, particularly the environmental smoke. In fact, this node group specifically is to simplify the process of working with the environment of Blender scenes, affecting its lighting and various volumetric effects simply in one node. These effects, or rather their location and scale, can be moved around and modified with an empty inside of the default scene, allowing you to modify its scale and location with a lot of ease. First of all, inside of the node, we'll take a look at some of the settings available. You have this skybox set of settings. These settings allow you to change the world color and the global lighting of your scene inside of Blender using the World tab under the shader editor. Now, it's not so easy to tell right now, but if we just add in an object, you can see that if we have just a texture in the environment, this makes no difference to the object. And if we set a color in the global light, this will light up and darken the object and give it color, even though it doesn't affect the global environment texture. This also works alongside an environment texture, such as this one from the Blender Cloud, which you can choose to plug into just the environment, which, if we remove global light, means you can have an environment texture show up on your renders, but without contributing light to the scene. Otherwise, you can plug it into both the environment and global light, and this, as it more normally would, will then light up your scene in the way that it usually would for connecting a environment texture. This slider here, the environment darken, just globally darkens down the environment and the global light from the environment texture to bring down the mood of the scene. Of course, if you choose, you can put your own mix slider in there and affect the texture in whatever ways you would want to normally, but that's not what this is about for right now. Moving on now to the core of this plugin, the volumetric environment effects. Well, for this we're going to need a scene. Here's one I have from before to help demonstrate how these effects can work. Now, this is the scene without any volumetric fog or shading of any kind, just the raw scene as it normally looks. Now, usually in Blender, when you want to add some kind of volumetric fog to a scene, you're going to get the effects globally thick across the entire scene. That means the more space there are between two objects, no matter how close or far those objects are or where they are, it's going to have fog applied to it, even in ways that you don't want it to. For example, in this scene, we would like to have an effect of thick fog over there in the distance, but we don't want to desaturate or obfuscate the scene in the foreground here. We want it to be clear and open and visible. Well, with this plugin, that gives you the ability to do this. We can see by bringing this controller down to a smaller size that the fog exists only within this sphere, this empty, and nowhere else in the scene. That means that if we want to have a fog in only a certain environment, we can just encase only that environment and the rest of the scene will be unaffected. This, incidentally, also increases your render time, since it's only calculating it in the specific places you require this effect. But furthermore, it gives you controls to affect the fall-off and the cut-off. Now, what do I mean by those? Well, inside of the node, there are a few settings which I unfortunately can't put on the controls here. You have to click on the button here in the corner and find these two sets of sliders here. There are two, one for the mist, one for the fog. These both, well, let's just go through the settings quickly. The color density and fall-off of both of these sets do pretty much the same thing. The color changes the shade of the volumetric effects. Density affects how thick it appears. And the fall-off changes how Blender handles the cutoff that I was about to show you a moment ago. For mist, it's exactly the same, the color, the glow, the fall-off, except with fog, the fog itself does not emit light. It requires other sources of light to show it off, to illuminate it. Mist, on the other hand, emits its own light, as you can see here. So in a way, although similar, they have opposite results. Fog, the further away it is from the camera, the darker it gets. Mist, the further away it is, the brighter it gets. Mist may actually be a better example of showing you what the different cutoff settings can do, since it's brighter and you can see it more easily. If nothing else, it's a better way of showing you what the fall-off slider does. You can see right now the sphere it's a sphere. It's a solid ball, and the fall-off is on 0, the lowest it can go. Putting it up, the ball becomes softer until it nearly disappears. This affects how gradually, how smoothly it transitions from off to on to off again inside. But as I was saying, the purpose of this is that it allows you to not only affect the fog's specific position, but its cutoff. Now, I've mentioned that a few times, but what I actually mean by that is that if we go inside the node group, as we mentioned before, we have one for the fog and one for the mist, and this represents where it is on, black represents when it is off, and by dragging it closer to the edge, we can see some changes happening in the scene. And now we can see the effect we have is very different. We've taken all of the fog that was here before. This is how it would look without any plugin, by the way. There's no control over how much fog appears, where it starts, where it ends, and we turn it into this. It's nice and controllable, and you can put it specifically to the parts you want it to appear. Now, as I mentioned wanting previously, this foreground where the action is going on is clear, completely clean from fog effects. Meanwhile, the background still has this kind of environmental fog effect. Better still, as I also mentioned before, the more distance through this mist we see, the brighter this mist appears to be, until it eventually reaches pure white, since it is emitting its own light source. That means the skybox will always be purely the color set by the mist effect, or purely grey or black if it's a fog effect. But this also allows us to affect the cutoff on the end point, not just the start point. This slider here on the right controls the distance from the start point, the center of the empty. This one on the left controls the maximum distances, preventing the white washout we saw before, since it's no longer taking up the entire world with mist, only the fog sphere in the center. But just to show you, just to demonstrate, we're going to push the start and the end right close together and boost up the intensity, just so it's easy to see. And now we can see that we have almost a solid wall of this fog going all the way around our scene. And yet the moment we cross the threshold, it again exists only within that sphere. Adjusting the settings more, let's try to create an actual, more realistic mist effect. Now, as you can see, unlike before where we were left with a purely grayed out mess that's difficult to see through and slow to render, it just doesn't look good. It grants us artistic control and precision over the fog in our scene. In my opinion, without this node plugin, the settings we have available by default are clumsy and inaccurate. With this plugin, you have the ability to set exactly how thick, how far, and when your fog starts and ends. As well, for a bonus, as adding in these other environmental settings, so you can easily change your skybox, darken it, and associate or disassociate it from your light sources, your global light, rather. This Blender plugin is definitely not the most sophisticated plugin available for Blender, but to me at least it's a necessary part of giving yourself full creative control, freedom and precision when trying to work with the default environmental effects that Blender comes with. It's given me the ability to distinctly approach every scene with the efficient control needed to speed up my workflow and improve my ability to create magic from this already magical software. Hopefully this plugin will be of use to you too. Hopefully this video was a good guidance for your path ahead.